And at 3:15 we'll start. Hopefully Mr. Levin gets here, right? Emily and Micah are here. I'm sure oh, look at everybody on the bus. I see you. What's happening?
Or Mr. Prince, I got the whole bus right here being forced to listen. So I'm making them all lock in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's 3:15, so we're gonna get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to our third installment of the 2024-2025 HW Alumni at Series. I promise you, in spite of the quote-unquote prestige of these schools, and Michael, you were asking about background noise. It's exactly what I'm talking about. I'll just mute it. And so now we should be good. Or Audrey, you're going to have to, yeah, I'll just mute it. We've already started with MIT. We were at Princeton on Friday, and it's Monday, so Stanford is on deck. Stanford is here. We've got two wonderful HW alums, Micah Rand and Emily Wessel, who will be our panelists. Our moderator, of course, will be the esteemed, the venerable, the legendary Rob Levin, who I think is an interesting choice for this, and only because I said we did Princeton on Friday and we're doing Stanford Monday, and he's an alum of both, but yet here he is decked out in red, right? And so maybe that's where we should start, because I'm going to turn this over to Rob, Emily, and Micah. Mr. Levin, why are you decked out in red as opposed to orange and black?
Okay, well, the first thing is I am venerable, as in like the Spanish viejo. So any opinions of mine, experiences of mine are outdated. That's why we have people far more contemporary. But I found that at Princeton, at Stanford, anytime you were drowning, somebody threw you a life raft. Now, not the undergraduate experience. I was there for business school. We even had Wednesdays off, which means that you were never more than 2 days behind, and every day was either a Thursday or a Friday. Princeton, anytime you were drowning, somebody was cheerfully throwing you a bowling ball. And so I found them both incredibly strong learning experiences, but one was cheerful and one was not, plus California. So we don't want 40-year-old impressions, though. So that is why we have Mika, who is about to start junior year. We have Emily, who has just finished graduate study. And it's still a little hard for the seniors on this call to picture themselves as you, because you're now officially old. Sorry. And of course you made it. And of course you've been successful. I mean, there you are at Stanford. But starting with you, Emily, can the two of you give us an idea of your Harvard Westlake selves? The things you were interested in, the things you did, what you were like as dorky, incoming students, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from Harvard Westlake in 2019. And while I was at Harvard Westlake, I was on the field hockey team and the track team, where I ran sprints and hurdles. I loved those. And I was also part of the Immigration Assistance Club, and I participated in UCLA Math Circle when I was at Harvard Westlake. At Harvard Westlake, I was really into math. That was like my thing. And I also did Rob Levin's 1 week camp, the Harvard Westlake Inc.
And I just remember asking Miss Kaufman that I was going to come over to middle school, and who were the people I absolutely had to meet, future leaders of venture, and you were one, and Coco Khalil was another. So that is pretty good company. Mika, talk about your time at Harvard Westlake, what your things were.
Right. So my name's Mika or Micah, both work. I graduated Harvard Westlake in 2022. which means my junior year was the COVID year. I think that just helps you get a timeline. I was at home, so I did not get the college touring experience that some of the students this year and in the coming years are probably going to have access to. I actually had not been to Stanford when I committed to going to the school. I had not been to the campus. At Harvard Westlake, I did Latin every year since 7th grade. I really enjoyed the classics. Physics, I got really into starting 10th grade, and in 12th grade is when I was doing both E&M and mechanics. So that was a major part of me. And also, I did both music theory and AP music theory while I was there, which was a lot of fun. I'm a classical guitarist. Today, I'm doing. Oh yes, that's my Harvard Westlake life.
Okay, and what was Stanford a first choice? Was it an ED for both of you? And if so, why?
I can go. Yeah, so Stanford, I applied early action, and then that was the only school I ended up applying to. When I was at Harvard Westlake, I was really attracted to Stanford's computer science curriculum, but I also their math curriculum. And I also felt like I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to study, but it felt like Stanford had good departments in like a lot of different areas. So I didn't have to worry too much about that. And I also liked that Stanford was in California, not too far from home.
Wisdom.
So can you remind me, the question was, why did I choose Stanford?
Was it your first choice going in? And if so, why?
I don't really think I had at any point a top choice during the college application process. I was very, very stressed out over just getting in anywhere. I was a bit in disaster mode a lot of the time, just trying to keep deadlines on front of me. I didn't have a single top choice. When Stanford came through, it was a very, very pleasant surprise. And so that was my attitude toward it. I was surprised and not, but I wouldn't call it top choice in that it was the one school I was dead set on.
But once you found out, why was it a pleasant surprise? What did you like about it before you went? Because you literally didn't go.
Yeah, that's right. What I liked about when I was graduating Harvard Westlake, computer science was very much where I wanted to go. I was kind of alternating between computer science and electrical engineering in terms of what I wanted to do, but at the time, computer science was my priority. I wrote a few essays on computer science that I boldly submitted to Stanford in my application. So that the computer science and electrical engineering, those are both strong suits at Stanford, and was very strong suits at Stanford. So that's kind of what put Stanford ahead of the others.
Speaking of which comp sci classes did the two of you take at Harvard Westlake, and what other activities did you have where you were honing your craft beyond that?
Do you want to go, Emily?
Oh yeah, so I took Ms. Kaufman's Intro to Programming 1 and 2 at the middle school, and then I took AP Computer Science A in 10th grade, and then Design and Data Structures Honors in 11th grade, and then Advanced Topics in Computer Science in 12th grade. And then I also participated in the hackathon and a few other, like Mr. Stout organized us to go to some like computer science competitions, but I would not say that I was like super into computer science in high school. Like when I was a high school student, I thought of myself as a math student. And I felt like that was what mattered to me. That was how I spent my summers. You know, that was what I really prioritized. And I feel like where I really learned to be a software engineer was at Stanford.
And I'd like to underscore what you just said, in that I teach a class called The Business of Life to seniors, have a lot of alums come back, and most of their lives have turned out amazingly. None of them have turned out as planned. I mean, you guys haven't strayed nearly as far from the path as most, but for all the people who are participants in this, trust me, don't worry that things will turn out differently than you planned. They will. Micah, what about you in terms of your activity? Did you take, I don't know if we did you take the Hutchison engineering course? Which courses did you take here that would be relevant other than obviously physics?
Yeah, as far as computer science, I had a very, very different journey. Became interested in computer science at the end of ninth grade. I was kind of jealous of a friend who had the foresight and to enroll in Miss Kaufman's programming courses. So I was envious of that. That kind of set a spiral. I began learning game development, and until senior year of Harvard Westlake, I was entirely self-studied in programming, in just finding whatever C++ problems I could find online to do over the summer. I began to really enjoy reading some of the very nerdy technical manuals on programming languages and game engines. And in senior year, I'm not sure if I'm a very good example, but I emailed several teachers trying to get myself into design and data structures without having satisfied the prerequisites that I should have. And luckily, I was able to take that course in senior year and finally get some formal academic work under my belt before coming to Stanford. And then as far as physics, yeah, I did not do the Hutchison engineering class.
Mike, I would say that's not a good example. That's a great example that the road to yes is paved with no's, and you just keep going. You only need one yes. So anyway, it's a beautiful Monday afternoon, a little warm, especially down here. But why are you giving up your Monday afternoon? Yes, to help out Harvard Westlake students and families. That's awesome. But why are you so jazzed about Stanford? And Michael, we will start with you, who is very much in the process. You're 2 years in.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you like the place?
The strongest, my favorite aspect of Stanford has been the support that I've been able to find, both from a huge abundance of advisors, all with a lot of wisdom and experience. And so I wanted to be able to point that out to people, that it's not the most obvious thing going into the college search process. It's not something that's necessarily featured on the top of the Stanford website, but there is so much support here. So many people, I guess you mentioned the life raft versus the bowling ball. There's a lot of life rafts out there for you to grab onto and get some. For an example, I've had an advisor over the summer very helpfully go through my courses and arrange them optimally to fit the electrical engineering major requirements.
So was it easy? At Harvard Westlake in 7th grade, literally, I think at Fast Start, you are incentivized to go and seek out faculty offices, and it just becomes part of the water. So that means when you dropped into Stanford, it was a piece of cake for you to find the people you needed?
It was not easy. It was not obvious. In fact, part of it is because you only get a major advisor after you've enrolled in a major. So maybe some of my advice would be to enroll in a major as early on as possible. That gives you 1 or 2 more advisors at least to push you in the right direction. There's also
what if you choose the wrong major? You've got this path, and what if you goof?
You've hit on one of the other, I think, major strengths of Stanford, which is just how flexible the school has been. I know some schools will kind of lock you in as soon as you apply, but Stanford is kind of like a sea of majors that you can just select from once you've gotten in. And that was another major advantage for me when I was choosing between computer science and electrical engineering, especially.
Thank you. Emily, you've gone through the journey, not just 4 years, but you've gotten a master's as well. So Stanford lifer, why? What do you like about it?
I would say the thing I like the most is the computer science curriculum. I think it's very well designed. I think the lecturers and the professors are very passionate about their work. They're very qualified. A lot of them have applied the algorithms that we're learning about at places like Pinterest or other big tech places. They've applied these algorithms at scale. And it's, it was such a privilege to learn from them. And I think that the weekly problem sets had so many interesting questions, and it was so much fun to work on them, with friends and, in the library in a group setting, and, figure them out together. That was a really fun experience. I think another thing is Stanford has a co-term program. So I did this program. It was 5 years, and I did a bachelor's and a master's, and I really appreciated that, because I feel like it really set me up well for a career as a software engineer.
Now, speaking of setting you up, if you remember that ink you were in, that I did a cheesy presentation, and there was this star in the Silicon Valley. Why did the Silicon Valley grow up there? Number one, to what extent do you remember the historical context, why the Silicon Valley grew up there? And to what extent are both of you finding, but Emily, you've already found that it's helped you? How does it influence campus culture, intern culture? What's special about being there rather than, let's say, Boston or a small town in New Jersey? Or Philly, Quasi? What's great about being in Palo Alto?
Well, I think at Stanford, there's definitely a culture around internships. And there's a lot of excitement on campus about getting an internship, and there are a lot of career fairs, and a lot of your friends, especially your older friends, will have interned at the places you're interested in looking at going back for a full-time position. And so, it's just internships are just in the water. And I think that doing an internship can really help you understand what a full-time position looks like, and also the soft skills involved in that position, beyond just the computer science tools that you learn in school. How do you actually apply those into at scale?
Micah, your take as somebody who's still in the midst of it and facing the whole where do I spend junior summer challenge?
As far as Silicon Valley is concerned, I think the actual geographical location hasn't been much of, at least not that I'm aware of, an impact on me, except for the weather, which of course is always welcome. But I think 99% of my hours have been on campus in the past 2 years, no joke, on that estimate. So as far as geographical, there's that. Is there another aspect to the question that you intended?
Well, in terms of connections, in terms of the fact that Silicon Valley did grow up around Hewlett-Packard, and Hewlett and Packard went to school, engineering school at Stanford, and had a garage in Palo Alto. To what extent, the hundreds of companies that are there today, the venture capital companies on Sand Hill Road, to what extent, even if you're on campus 99% of the time, to what extent do you feel that vibe? And Emily, you haven't yet told people what you're doing for a career. So I'm going to throw it to Micah first, but then if you would please jump in and tell people where you're working and how you got there.
So I think the connections aspect is something I'm just beginning to tap into. For better or for worse, it took me a couple of years to really figure that out. But I spent a lot of the summer contacting Stanford alumni and people that are in the industry that I'm wanting to go into. And geographically, yes, these people are located right around Stanford, all within the next town over, if not in Palo Alto. And as soon as the school year starts and I'm back up in Palo Alto, I'll have a lot of different people I can get coffee with by walking a few minutes off campus. That will be fantastic.
And Emily, speaking of next town over.
Yeah, I still live in Palo Alto.
But don't you work in Mountain View?
Yes, I do. So when I was a sophomore, and I was in a computer systems class, and I mentioned to my professor that I was starting to look at internships, and he set me up with an internship at Meta, and I interned there for a couple summers, and then now I work at Google.
tell us about what you do there and the company, the sub company that you're with.
Yeah, so I'm part of Verily, which is part of Google, and I'm a full stack software engineer. So that means I make websites. And so we have a smartwatch, and I'm working on the website that goes along with the smartwatch. So it's a full stack role. So it's like front end, which is like what you see on the website, and then also like back end, which is like how you manage the data that the website is receiving.
By the way, when you mentioned devices, is a fellow named Rick Osterloh still head of hardware there? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
If so, please reach out to him. He's Harvard Westlake, actually Harvard School. So, all right, let me ask another question. Depending how we're laid out in everybody's screen, I'm looking at Mr. France on my left, but as I look at you, Emily, and you, Micah, and back at myself, we all kind of look sort of pale. Does that reflect a lack of diversity at Stanford? We're coming from Harvard Westlake, which is quite a diverse place. Los Angeles is a wondrously diverse place. What's Stanford like?
I can go first, I guess, because I'm also current. I'll be there soon. I maybe just out of the small sample size here, it's just a little bit of an anomaly. But I have found Stanford incredibly diverse. I think on a daily basis, I'll hear 4 different languages being spoken across the campus. Even more accents being spoken within the various classes. The only element that might not be diverse is make of it what you will. In my engineering classes, in my electrical engineering classes, I wouldn't be surprised if 80% male students was correct, if not an underestimate.
Well, it's better. It used to be 95%. So
yeah, and the campus itself is majority female. If that is of interest.
Emily, what did you notice in your time there, and what sort of representation we're hearing international beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree that Stanford is a diverse place, definitely an international place. I mean, Stanford is like a world-class university that is able to attract people from like around the world, and like truly everyone wants to go to Stanford. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that. In terms of gender diversity, I think it's at least in computer science, like maybe there are more men, but there are just so many people. There are like plenty of women as well. So I felt like I was able to like, I don't know, I felt like I was able to make a lot of really close female friends in computer science, who I could work on projects with and who I still see all the time after graduation.
Now, you can have a place that's very diverse, but when I was at Princeton, it was very much clumpy. It was very much you're part of this group, you're part of that group. To what extent do you find this a diverse and inclusive community that you find you're making all kinds of different friends?
I have found that I have no barrier in terms of people being of some different religion or ethnicity or anything different from me. I've made friends with all sorts of people. I don't know what might have caused that to change, other than maybe just there's a greater culture of open-mindedness than there was some time ago. But I haven't encountered any sort of barrier in that area.
Well, I was talking about Princeton some time ago, not Stanford some time ago. The flip side is, okay, it's not the East Coast. It's got a lot of the advantages you've grown up with in California: diversity, inclusion, decent climate. Does it ever feel like Harvard Westlake North or Harvard Westlake University, to the extent that that's a downside?
Emily, do you want to take it first?
Oh, sure. I mean, I would say that one of like the biggest differences between Harvard Westlake and Stanford is that at Stanford you will be in some like lecture classes that have hundreds of students, especially if you're in like the introductory classes. I think that like at most big universities, if you want to take Psych 1 or Econ 1 or like Computer Science 101, it's just going to be a huge lecture hall. And that's just a different experience than being in a class that has 10 or 12 students where your teacher sees you every day or every other day and is like has a really good understanding of your progress and is able to track how you're doing through very frequent quizzes. It's definitely a different experience to like, you know, you have all these lectures and then there's like a midterm and a final, and it's kind of like on you to like go from the content to a true understanding that will let you perform well on the midterm and the final.
And
so I think
that's
that's
a
big transition.
sorry to interrupt, but that's a great reminder right there to folks that just because someplace is a college and a university everybody wants to go to doesn't mean it's the best for you. I mean, there is this short list of schools. We all know it, but that doesn't mean it's the best place for you. Okay, sorry for interrupting. That was just so valuable. Continue, Emily. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that that would be like a big transition. I know that we've also, you know, there's also the quarter system. So
Talk about that, please, because that varies from college to college, and the impact is surprisingly large.
yeah.
So explain it to us. We're semester people.
Okay. So during a semester, that would normally start in September and then go to early June or late May or maybe even early May. But at Stanford, the schedule is we start in late September. So there will be a couple weeks when you're in Los Angeles at home and all your friends are back at college and you're like, okay. And then you'll end a couple of weeks later than your friends from Harvard Westlake in late June. And then the quarter system, it's pretty fast paced. The classes it's 10 weeks of classes and then 1 week of final exams. And there's at other schools, there might be a reading period where you have a couple weeks between the classes and the exam to prepare for the exam. But at Stanford, sometimes we have like one reading day or like 2 reading days or something. But it's very, very, very fast paced and doesn't give you as much time to like settle into the classes and get to know your schedule and get to know your professors a little bit more. So I think that a lot of us think that the quarter system is the downside.
Micah, your take on it.
I'll discuss one of the upsides maybe and one of the downsides. For me, one of the benefits of the quarter system is greater flexibility. At least in those first 2 years, that was a huge boon to be able to take some courses, and they generously give you 3 weeks of the quarter, which is 30% of it, as a shopping period during which you can drop and add classes more or less at will. But as far as flexibility is concerned, you can try out a major for a third of the year or 2/3 of the year, and switch in the last third or last 2/3. There's more decisions, more times to make course decisions, which just translates to I can change my mind more times. So that's great. I also personally enjoy the fast pace. I can totally imagine that not being something someone enjoys, though. So that's a potential downside. And then a real downside is the lack of depth. In some courses, you really don't get to explore an idea fully all the time, and their teachers can be compelled to strip some of the material down to the bare minimum to get you familiar with it. So at least later, when you come back to it, maybe in your working life, you'll be able to remember it or bring it back, revive the knowledge.
Okay, thank you. And I can tell you, having been part of both, the one thing I liked better about Princeton was the semester system. And actually, it was even more rushed. It was 24 weeks. It was 12 and 12. It wasn't 10 by 3. The academics were more rushed, but then you had lots of time, 4 weeks in some cases, to forget the stuff, do your preparation, take your exams, and walk away feeling confident. So these are just the sorts of things, large versus small, quarter versus semester everybody ought to be thinking about? Well, I hope that we've stirred a lot of questions, because I would ask people, if possible, to turn cameras on, even if you're in a bus or something like that, unless it wrecks your stream. And please ask questions, because you have here two people that did spectacularly well at Harvard Westlake and have gone on to the sort of great things a lot of us dream of. So please, cameras on if you can, and ask some great questions. And somebody has to go first.
Yeah, the hand emoji, or you can type your questions in the chat. We have one I know from Gina T. I'm not sure if Gina's still on the line. Gina, are you here?
I am. Hey, everybody. Just wondering, my son is really interested in the D School at Stanford, the new design school, fairly new. And I was wondering if any of you know anything about the D School.
Emily, do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, sure. My freshman roommate actually was very into design, and she ended up majoring in product design. So she took this class called Design That Understands Us. I don't know if they still have it, but there's a book, and on the book the cover is like a kettle, but the spout is in the opposite direction. So that's the book that's like a lot of people at Stanford read in product design. And I think that like design is actually like a huge part of the tech space. There are a lot of like UX, like user experience and user interface designers who will like draw out like what a website or an app should look like, and then they give us the drawing, and we like make the drawing come to life. But I mean, like creating the like storyboarding the project, you know, it's a huge field that a lot of people at Stanford are really interested in.
I wish I could talk specifically about the D School. Only secondhand, I can say this: the students I've met there who are part of it seem to be enjoying their time. However, hearing Emily speak about it reminded me there are many maker spaces on Stanford's campus that are I've only just found out about these, but there's I think 6 or 7, if not more, and they are a huge resource. There's some very powerful, dangerous, powerful, woodworking instruments, steelwork. I think there's like some place you can make a silicon mold and then put it in an oven, and you get your silicon material out of the oven. There's a couple electrical engineering labs that I've spent some time in. I had a friend who she made and laser cut a backgammon board, like all on her own. It's just so you can use it for fun. You can use it. They call it the product realization labs, I think, and they are a really cool thing to know about.
Awesome. Thank you both.
We have a question from Audrey, who's in a loud car right now. So she typed her question, and it's a diversity question again. How is campus life diverse at Stanford? Both of you are computer science students, but do you think Stanford facilitates exposure to all types of classes and clubs?
Do you want to take that, Emily, first?
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say, so first of all, I actually minored in history. So, there's, the humanities departments are very strong. They have, great classes. And people love to take them. Also, there are some distribution requirements called ways of thinking, ways of doing. So, you actually have to take a class in lots of different areas. All the ways requirements have like kind of silly names like creative expression or aesthetic and interpretive inquiry, which means like you have to take an English class, actually two English classes. So, yeah. And, I had lots of friends who majored in the humanities. The humanities department is quite strong. They have, a lot of very impressive professors. And I always like one thing I kind of wanted to do every quarter at Stanford was like have one class that was a smaller setting, like a more discussion based class. So I don't know, that was just like a priority for me. But yeah, go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, as far as Stanford fostering interactions with diverse like between various groups of people. They have some events. There's some musical events that are a lot of fun. There was some sort of night market last year. That was a really cool thing. I think that's an annual thing. I must have missed it freshman year. That was really fun to go to. But certainly there's no barrier. Like I think if it was something you were seeking, you could absolutely have the most varied campus life. You no limit on that. But I don't think there are events geared around getting people together quite that way. I'm not sure that
Can I
maybe
ask-
Emily knows one.
If I could ask a follow-up question related to diversity, coming from a suburban high school, do you find it limiting at being what's in truth a suburban college? I mean, Silicon Valley it's not the same as being in the city. It's not the same as being in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that there's a piece missing? Do people in Stanford go up to the city, or is it just, even though it's an hour away, does that end up being too far?
For me, this, as I've mentioned, I've spent so much time, most of my time on the campus. And I think that's a kind of a common experience with some other people. The campus is huge, and it's not, at least mental, there's a bit of a mental barrier, if not the physical one, and just getting from, say, your dorm to the edge of campus. I think there's at least 5 minutes to 10 minutes of a no man's land, this large grove of trees, and finally you step foot into non-Stanford territory. The question was, but about, I do feel like there's an aspect, you can say missing or just different from other colleges, that there is no, I do not get the feeling of a college town or a city life existing around me that I can just walk off. And like my friends at Columbia, they spend a lot of time on the subways and going to restaurants and nightclubs and stuff. I've not done much of that. And when people do it, they usually get an Uber together, and it's like 20 minutes to get to the nearest club or something. So that is not an aspect that is integral to people's lives that I'm aware of.
So if you love NYU or Harvard, you're probably not going to love Stanford.
You're going to miss something. You are going to miss something.
Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Well, Emily, what do you think of it? What was your experience in terms of?
I mean, yeah, I would definitely agree that like Palo Alto is synonymous with Stanford. But one caveat to that, I would say, is probably the dorm culture, which I think is really good. Like when freshmen have the option to live in a freshman dorm. So that's like about 80 people in a dorm together, and then there are like 5 or like 6, or there's maybe bigger clusters of like dorms of greater people, and like those freshman dorms get really close. Every Friday and Saturday night, the RAs have what's called an on-call. So they have like kind of an event in the dorm lounge where they bring in, like a lot of them will do like painting and pizza or something like that. So like you can go hang out with your dorm. Then, in my dorm, and I think in most dorms, like they eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, at a big long table, and you're sitting with all your friends. And then the dorms will go on lots of trips. Usually there's a winter trip to Lake Tahoe to go skiing during winter quarter. And then in spring, a lot of dorms will go on a Yosemite trip. Sometimes they come to Disneyland in Los Angeles. And, a lot of like shorter weekend trips. Like my dorm went kayaking. My best friend's dorm that went to a chocolate making class in San Francisco. So, even though like, Palo Alto is synonymous with Stanford, and I spent a lot of, almost all of my time on campus. Like, I would definitely say that the like social scene, and the like opportunity to hang out with your classmates at Stanford is pretty good.
And for snowboarders and skiers, being 4 hours from Tahoe is not the worst thing in the world either. Other questions from the crowd? Chase.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if either of you had a chance to interact with the study abroad program, or if you know someone who did.
Micah, you're on
All right, I'll go first.
The pressure is on now.
I'm actively considering applying for, probably will apply for the quarter abroad in Oxford for the spring. I have two friends who are going to Oxford this fall, and I had a friend who's graduated now go to Oxford, I think his senior winter or fall. It is across the board considered the greatest, I think, people's highlight of their undergrad career when they do the quarter abroad. That's what I was told I went to declare my major to the head of the EE major, and I asked him what his thoughts on the quarter abroad, and he said it would probably delay graduation by a quarter, but also that it was people's favorite experience from their undergrad. So that's something to weigh. That's the extent of my knowledge of the quarter abroad.
Okay, thanks.
Emily, do you have any knowledge on anything to say about it?
Oh yeah. So I did not study abroad, but a lot of my friends did. I have one friend who majored in geology, and she went to Australia for kind of like a marine biology type thing. So they did a lot of like snorkeling and hiking, and she saw a lot of wildlife and a lot of rocks. And then I know some people who went to Madrid, and liked the Spanish learning there. And then so right now I live in Palo Alto right now with my friend from Stanford. And she went to Oxford and really loved it. And she actually she studied computer science at Stanford and statistics. But now but at Oxford she studied music. So she said it didn't really like help her fulfill any requirements. But she loved the experience.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Great question. By the way, do either of you guys know anybody that did a gap year before Stanford?
I do not.
Okay.
I know people who've done gap years between their undergrad and masters. And I guess I don't know this person, but I've heard tell of a person, a senior now, who did. He took a year off to work at Tesla, and that transformed his approach to his learning as an electrical engineer. He came back with a lot more applied knowledge, and just a much more rigorous understanding of what was going on than the students who had only encountered this stuff in an academic setting.
Okay, thanks. And I do know two Stanford students, one of whom is a Harvard Westlake grad and an HW Inc. and Venture grad, Alec Katz, I think was in your class, Emily. And
Yep.
He took a year off, which has turned into 2 years off, and Forbes 30 under 30, and they've been on Good Morning America. If you look up the company Curious Cardinals. So if there's something that's pulling you away from school, listen. Okay, we've got time for one more question.
We have another question. We might be out of here 2 minutes early this Monday afternoon. I think we are. Mika, Emily, and of course, Mr. Levin, thank you so much for the insight, for the conversation, for the sketch of Stanford. I know this 45-minute panel and question and answer session can't give us all that is Stanford, but I think you all did a really good job of showing what it was like. I said thank yous come in from our audience. This will be posted either tonight. I want to say tonight, though it is Monday Night Football tonight, probably tomorrow morning to be safer for me. So people like, has the Stanford panel been posted yet? So look out for it there on resources. HW Works, which Emily and Mika should both be on. You can also reach them through their LinkedIn. And of course, Mr. Levin is an HW staple. It's hard to miss, and he's on campus. And you can talk to him about Stanford and apparently Princeton. Okay, it is 3:59. We're out of here a minute early. Panelists, moderators, any closing thing?
Thanks everyone for coming. Really, and thank you, Rob, for moderating. Really enjoyed this conversation with you both, and with Emily, with you as well, of course.
Well, thank both of you. And remember, as folks, as you're seeing them pay it forward, as you become alums, please do the same. That's how HW works. Harvard Westlake for life, baby.
Could not have put it any better than that. On that note, we'll close out. Enjoy the rest of your Monday afternoons, everyone.
All right, goodbye.